Let's go Dolphins! What if I told you that Tyreek Hill's days in Miami might be numbered, not because of injury or age, but by choice? What if the Dolphins, even winning, considered trading their most electrifying player? This isn't speculation. It comes straight from ESPN's bold predictions for 2025. And it gets even bolder when you realize this could all be part of a larger plan, one that could completely reshape the franchise's identity mid-season. But that's not all. Behind the scenes, roster battles are heating up, young players are poised to break out or be cut, and Chris Grier, yes, that Chris Grier, is once again walking a tightrope between fan frustration and front office politics. The pressure is mounting, and if things go even slightly wrong, the consequences could be enormous. But before we dive into the madness unfolding inside the Dolphins facilities, don't forget to like this if you've been a true fan through the ups and downs, the disappointments, and the false hopes. If you've been rocking the aqua and orange for over 20 years, leave a comment right now saying, "Go Dolphins! My heart bleeds aqua and orange." Okay, here's what I'm listening to, and you'll want to stick with me until the end. Now, buckle up, because what's happening in this Dolphins roster is not just about preparing for the season, it's about survival for some players and a full-on audition for others. There's a major sense of urgency at camp, and it's not just coming from Coach McDaniel, it's coming from the top down, with looming decisions that will absolutely define this franchise's future. Let's start with some of the flashpoints, the wide receiver room. Yes, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are locked in, but beyond that, there's real tension. Eric Ezukanma is healthy again and making a strong push to carve out a role, which brings up a huge question. What happens to players like River Crocraft and Braxton Berrios? According to what we're seeing in practice, Ezukanma has outshined them both and even rookie Taj Washington. The coaches are clearly invested in Ezukanma, and there's buzz that he could be the WR4 entering the season. And speaking of rookies, Taj Washington has flashed in moments, especially on deep routes and screens, but his inconsistencies could cost him a roster spot unless he makes a huge leap in the final preseason games. There's pressure on him, no doubt, and it's not helping that Chris Grier's draft history hasn't exactly inspired confidence. It makes every rookie mistake even more glaring. Grier's rope is thin. He can't afford another miss here. On defense, all eyes are on the edge rushers and interior D-line. Let me tell you, Deshaun Hand has been one of the biggest surprises of camp. He's everywhere, showing up in the backfield, disrupting plays, and playing with that dog mentality that this team desperately needs. Benito Jones, meanwhile, seems to be a roster lock, especially with the way he's handling both the run and pass. But here's where it gets really spicy. There's a silent competition brewing between players like Deshaun Hand, Neville Gallimore, and Brandon Piley. All three are fighting for one or two spots, and it's no exaggeration to say that every single rep in these final practices and games could determine who's packing their bags. Piley has been getting some key reps, but his inconsistency might just leave the door open for Gallimore, who brings more pass rushing upside. Then we shift over to linebacker. Duke Riley, David Long Jr., and Anthony Walker Jr. have been rotating as key contributors, but the real story here is Channing Tindall, former third-round pick. High expectations, and yet, he's been quiet, too quiet. The staff isn't sold on him just yet, and unless he flashes soon, it wouldn't shock anyone if he gets cut or buried deep on the depth chart. This is where Grier's drafting once again comes under fire. How many more mid-round busts can this team absorb before real change is made? Another position where things are heating up is cornerback. Nick Needham is finally back and healthy, but he's clearly still shaking off some rust. Meanwhile, Ethan Bonner is making waves. His range, instincts, and ball skills have been impressive, and there's a strong chance he could leapfrog players like Cam Smith or even take meaningful snaps if the veterans falter. Bonner's rise could become one of the most intriguing underdog stories of camp. And let's not forget about Keaton Smith. He's making a strong case to stay. The Dolphins are looking at all options in the secondary, especially with the looming uncertainty around Xavier Howard's long-term outlook. Cam Smith, last year's second-rounder, continues to be inconsistent, another red flag tied to Grier's resume. At safety, the team seems committed to Elijah Campbell, who's been solid both in special teams and defensive packages. But there's a logjam here, and someone like Jordan Miller could end up being the odd man out. The offensive line, however, might be the most concerning unit heading into the season. Terron Armstead's health is always a question mark. Lester Cotton is taking first-team reps and looks set to start at left guard. But how long can this line hold up, especially with Connor Williams still out and Liam Eichenberg moving around trying to find his fit? Here's the twist. Isaiah Wynn isn't doing much to make his case right now, and the coaches seem more comfortable rotating Cotton and Eichenberg instead. That should tell you everything about where Wynn stands in the pecking order. And speaking of pressure, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Tyreek Hill, and the ESPN bold prediction that shook Dolphins fans to their core. Yes, you heard that right. According to Seth Walder from ESPN, there's a legitimate scenario where Tyreek Hill could be traded before the November 4th trade deadline. And while it sounds outrageous at first, when you dig deeper into the situation, it's not as crazy as it sounds. Let me break it down. The Dolphins have 8 games before that trade deadline. If the team starts slow, say 3-5 or worse, Greer and the front office will have some brutal decisions to make. Do you hold onto an aging superstar with a $52.8 million cap hit in 2026? Or do you flip him while his value is still high and get something back before you lose him for nothing? This is exactly the kind of financial mismanagement and roster instability that has defined Chris Grier's tenure. Again, Greer should have been fired already, and the fact that he's still around making these decisions has a lot of fans nervous. If he botches this situation, trading away one of the most electric players in franchise history without a clear plan for the future, it could go down as one of the worst moves in Dolphins history. But here's the twist. What if the Dolphins start the season strong? What if they're 5-3 or even 6-2 heading into the deadline? Some believe that might take the trade off the table, but others argue the opposite. If Malik Washington emerges, if Jalen Waddle takes that leap into full WR1 territory, and if the defense holds up without Tyreek demanding double coverage every snap, then maybe the Dolphins believe they don't need him to win anymore. And let's be real, Tyreek's presence does more than fill a stat sheet. He opens the field for everyone else. He forces defenses into uncomfortable looks. He makes your offense dangerous just by existing on the field. Trading him while the team is actually winning would be an incredibly risky move, one that could fracture locker room chemistry and alienate fans. But with that 2026 cap number looming like a storm cloud, the front office might decide to act early and cash in before things get ugly. Now, shifting gears, let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa, because this entire season hinges on one thing, his health. ESPN nailed it with their research. When Tua starts, this team is 25-17. Without him, 3-8. That's the difference between playoff contention and bottom 5 draft pick. It's that simple. Tua isn't just the quarterback, he's the franchise, and with contract talks around the corner, this season will decide his future with the team. And that brings us to the national media perception of this team. According to ESPN, the Dolphins only have a 34.9% chance to make the playoffs and an 11.7% shot at winning the AFC East. They projected 8.1 wins, despite Miami finishing 8-9 last season while Tua missed 6 games. That math doesn't add up. If Tua plays 14 games last year, the Dolphins probably win 10. So why is the national consensus so down on Miami? Well, part of it might be the NFL's 21st ranking of the Dolphins in power rankings. Even within Chat Sports' own polls, the Fins were consistently ranked 21st or 22nd. But if you ask me, that's lazy analysis. There's no world where the Dolphins should be behind teams like the Bears, Falcons, or Steelers. This is a roster loaded with offensive firepower, a top 5 pass rush if healthy,